Bona tarda, buenas tardes.
So, good evening.
Welcome a tothom.
Welcome, one and all. It is a pleasure. It is a pleasure to welcome you to the new session of the RCR Open Program. This year, we're marking our 14th edition. Since 2012, the conference and debates cycle invites us to explore the connection between art and science with an interdisciplinary selection of top-level panelists. This is a space of creativity and critical thinking. The program is an initiative of the RCR Bunga Initiative, and since 2019, it has the support of the College of Architects of Catalonia. We would like to thank the NHA Foundation support, and also we want to underline the sponsorships of the CONECTA program. The connecting thread is a subtle and powerful concept, the atmosphere. We want to discuss about the intangible dimension of the space that connects us with emotions, memories, senses. Atmospheres are born in emotions, in memory, in what is not tangible, light, colors, and immaterial elements, emotions, and the soul. Even if we cannot measure or touch them, they have the capacity to transform us and to bring deepness to our experience in the world. Building atmospheres is a chemical act, a tangible and intangible game between shape and mystery. In this very same framework, we are celebrating the 7th edition of the Forest Matter program on the poetic force of trees. Before all conferences, we offer you a sensorial experience selected around 200 pieces. The piece we've seen is a good example of the previous. It is called Leaves, Mount of Leaves, by a Brazilian visual artist combining music, audiovisual, painting, and technology to create items with their own language. In this case, the proposal is a visual journey where dry leaves observe the movement of living trees as a metaphor of the dialogue between the past and the present, between quietness and the permanent flow of nature. And now let's jump into the main dish for this evening. We have the honor of having Xevi Bayona, an architect from Olot, as well as the panelists who will present him, Jordi, with whom they share the same generation. Xevi Bayona is a lighthouse in ephemeris art and landscape architecture. His studio, Bayona Studio, believes in experimentation and a dialogue between disciplines. He's been recognized with several awards, such as the FAT, and he's, amongst others, the art director of the Girona Festival. Today, he will be presenting a conference titled Tempus, Fugit, a reflection around time, architecture, and art as atmospheres builder, a journey around a forest and ideas where uncertainty is not a limitation, but rather an opportunity. To open this conference, I have the pleasure to give the floor to Jordi Moret, an architect based in Olot. He develops very sensitive projects, friendly with the environment and conscious of sustainability. I would like to underline his commitment with the landscape as the delegate of the College of Architects, the Garrotxa-Ripollès, and he's an active member of several local entities. Having said that, I would like to hand it over to Jordi. The floor is yours.
Bona tarda. Gràcies, Andrea.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Andrea and RCR, for having invited me to this workshop. I would like to thank the College of Architects of Catalonia to start with. This workshop offers Olot and La Garrotxa the opportunity to become for a few days a lighthouse within the architecture industry. I have the honor of introducing Xevi Bayona, and I would like to do so referring to the topic of the open program, atmospheres, and how atmospheres have been very present in painting, in narrative, and in Olot architecture throughout the times. Speaking about atmospheres here in these beautiful buildings surrounded of a museum brings me to speak about Olot landscape, a pictorial style from the middle of the 19th century, adopted by Olot artists who took La Garrotxa as a source of inspiration. Naturalistic, bucolical landscapes and very emotional ones, oftentimes inspired in volcanoes, forests, and fields, representing atmospheres which awakened the emotion of bypassers, atmospheres which can be described also in the landscapes of the Stabbing, published in 1904 by the painter and writer Vayreda, with a narrative which combines and blends landscape and emotion. I would like to read a very short fragment. We'll do the best to translate it. It was an evening in the summer where the air brought some calm and the sky was crystal clear. The sun, which started bending towards the west, would bring attached to the clouds, and shadows became broader and broader in the valleys. The color was blue, as if it were a dream. The forest smelled of hot plants. The atmosphere was peaceful, silent, and grandiose. In this fragment, Vayreda produces a visual image. It brings us into an emotional landscape. Nature becomes the mirror of the inner part of the main character, an atmosphere which is savage and symbolic, with a very romantic background, at the same time a tragic and emotional one. In fact, RCR, you also have managed to preserve this very intimate relationship with La Garrotxa landscape. Your architecture gets inspired from the surroundings and opens a dialogue with the landscape, as Pep Sau captured in his pictures. Xevi Bayona is also an architect, deeply rooted in the region, and he captivates us with the atmospheres he builds. He works in the intersection between architecture, landscape, and ephemeris art. His work has a very sensitive approach to the place. I'm thinking about the ephemeris installations of the Girona festival, which for a few hours transform the landscape through light and fire, and where interesting atmospheres that can be felt and seen are perceived. An architect who works from sensitivity towards nature, space, and the emotional impact it brings to the audience. Let me say that Xevi Bayona is one of those architects who works with his hands, who projects, who experiences, and whom also manipulates and builds his own works. He's someone who understands that architecture cannot be limited to an office, but also it has to be in the region, in the territory, and with the territory. Xevi, it is a pleasure to share this session with you here today and listening to your thoughts about architecture, art, and landscape. Thank you.
Hola. Vale, en primer lloc...
Well, first of all, I would like to say thank you. I would like to thank RCR for inviting me here today. I have been admiring RCR for many years. In fact, I've been born surrounded by their work. And I've had this learning process since I was a child. And I'm very happy to be here in Olot giving this presentation. I have my siblings and friends here, and I have many colleagues. I have I see here many architects that are a benchmark to me. They are reference, and I can also see many students of mine. And I like to thank all my colleagues in our studio. There are quite a few of us working together. And I like to say hi to Cristina, Marta, Joel, Gerard, Luis, Amy, who are also here. And I'd like to thank the people at UERNA, because for 14 years we've been working together in the city, developing a project for the city. And the title was supposed to be Tempus Fugit, the title of my presentation, but it's now called Uncertainty. And I am referring here to nature, subject to our process of research. Heisenberg had this theory of uncertainty, and it's a theory that's very important for art and also for painting and philosophy. Uncertainty in this book by Geidenbeck that was illustrated by Dali. And here we see Dali's signature, but also Goya's signature, because Dali's work is based here on Goya's Caprichos. And it all starts with the Delphos oracle. So that's where you go to solve all types of uncertainty, to be able to live with uncertainty. And this leads us to wonder what's going on, what is it that is happening that we can't control. And we have many questions, but they are not easy to solve. We see here a forest. This is a drawing of a forest. I love to see the empty spaces among the trees that are part of the matter. And on the right, something is happening to the trees. Something is pushing the trees. Is it some wind, or what is it? And that's the uncertainty within this work. And this is the driver for some questions. Here we see the splash by Hotnik that explains life without seeing any human beings in this image. So we see how we can enjoy a space. We can enjoy a space, but this has an impact on architecture. So architects use a holistic traditional method to reply to all these questions based on their head, their heart, and their hands. And we have a prototype and we have an iteration. This is a photograph of my workshop. At home, everything starts here. We manipulate many materials, and now this workshop is too small. We now need bigger workshops to work the materials, but the idea is to be able to intervene in the world and to touch all these materials and make them become something else. And uncertainty is an uncomfortable position, but certainty is an absurd position. This is a quote by Voltaire. So let's welcome uncertainty. And today in my presentation, I'll be referring to the questions that refer to the place, to the void, to feeling, to art, to atmospheres, and to time. Then in the second part, we'll refer to the work through the head, the heart, and the hands. And all of this is mixed up together to create the projects, to create the prototypes. I'm going to share with you some projects that have many different hands involved, many different authors. And I will share them with you just to reflect on some of these questions. The first question would refer to the place, and Karma had organize this workshop about understanding the place. We are now in one of the best buildings in Olot. It's lacking some green, but it's still a beautiful building. And one of the proposals a few years ago was to create a nativity. And I thought, well, maybe we can do a warehouse for the three wise men, full of boxes that we would go and pick up in Girona and bring over to Olot. And so we changed the place for just a few moments. We changed the place, the atmosphere of the place, because with the boxes, there was a lot of silence. There was not so much echo. And some children would see here their gifts, the gifts that the three wise men bring on King's Day here. It's a project that we wanted to copy also in Barcelona in another warehouse. And another way of understanding the place is through the heritage. Heritage is what society believes is worth preserving and that we shouldn't be touching because the heritage is untouchable. So with ephemeral architecture, we can intervene in the heritage. We can understand it in a different way. We can interpret it in a different way. And in this way, we see the same heritage in different ways. Here we see this bridge in Manresa. And what would happen if for a few days or weeks or months, we attach this piece to the bridge? And this is a music piece made of different tubes. And in this way, the bridge becomes a musical instrument. It becomes a musical instrument with a different plasticity. It changes. This is a bridge from the Middle Ages that becomes a musical instrument. So the bridge changes just for a little while, for a few weeks. This 500 years old bridge changes. And we can also intervene in buildings. What happens, for example, if we create a circle around this bridge in Bilbao? Or what happens if we add these special elements, and these are like little diamonds, and in this way we intervene on the heritage that's already existing, and we are giving a new interpretation. And here we see some ruins, and Marta helped us with this. The idea was to understand this heritage in the Garrotxa. The idea was to understand this heritage of these old farmhouses that are all around the landscape. The idea was to reread this landscape, the landscape of these old farmhouses, these traditional buildings, to understand them differently. Here we see some images of this other project with Cancer Gantana that we did together with Jaume. The idea was to maintain the essence of this house. So we have people living here. The idea was to understand the ruins, and that is something interesting we have inside. I find it fascinating, and it was also fascinating in the Romantic period for Romantic artists, because there is a past that is unknown to us. There are secrets that are hidden in the ruins, and these are the different elements and pieces species we can find. So this is some heritage that we have, and that can lead us to certain questions. Now let's talk about the void and the matter. Void is what we inhabit. For example, in Japan, the core, the center of any place is empty. Whereas here we build everything up and we have no silence. We need to speak. We need to fill up all the void spaces with buildings. This is what happens in the Western world. And sometimes we need to pay attention to the Eastern world. And what happens with this void? This is a building that was refurbished 10 or 15 years ago. And we decided to create inside this building a Christmas tree without a tree. So we just created this tree with this void. We only had the little lights. There was no tree. And this is a workshop in Granollers where we had this cave created. So we had all these different straps with a void inside. And in San Jaume, we created this pavilion and we won a tender. And there was this pavilion in San Jaume with this wooden building with these void spaces. And the idea was to have this covered space. And here we have another project. And this one is very interesting. In Seville, what would happen if you had a square with a door? The idea was to have this dome, more than a door, a dome. And you could go into the dome, and in this way you had a view of the whole city. You had a horizontal view, but it was inside somewhere else. So the idea was to be in two places at the same time. This project in Caixa Forum in Barcelona, we also intervene with the heritage, and we created this new space with fabrics, so it was all textile that would let the light through, and the fabrics would dance with the wind. And you had this cave that was like a marine cave, like in the sea, and this was an intervention that we had during the summer months. So we had a void, and then this void was completed by this matter, and this matter was a soft type of matter. Here we have this domestic void in a ruin, and we created this new space with branches. And here in Olot, we have the main square, and we created all these spaces with this void in the middle. What happens when you stop having matter somewhere? What happens when you organize matter? And what happens when you let matter breathe? When you let matter breathe in silence? And here we organized a dinner for 500 people in this space. So we created a kind of void, a tent for 500 people dining. And when we refer to matter, I like to mention this dome made of 70 tons of steel. We place each of the elements one on top of the other, and it was 12 meters high with all these beams. So we see the mass outside and the void inside. And this was the goal. And that's the goal also of Romanesque churches, the void inside those stone walls. And here we see the void of a recent piece in Salou. We have the Passeig Carles Boigas in Salou. And we created this new space with stainless steel tubes. I was there with my colleagues, and we created once again a void inside these tubes of stainless steel. So we see this in a roundabout. This is the first time we intervened in a roundabout. So this is just a simple roundabout that changes thanks to this intervention. Now we are building a new house in Sils in the middle of a forest, and we are using different pieces to create once again these voids. So we have this forest of pine trees, and the building is there in the middle of the forest. So we need the matter to understand the void. Or here we have this Urania project with fire, and we created it, executed it, and burnt it. It was a kind of cave. We didn't know what it was going to be like at first. Sometimes the method or the prototype is so huge that you don't have enough space for it. So this is what we created, and we burnt it. And that was part of the beauty of it, to understand the concept of time and how things are beautiful at a certain point in time, but then they vanish. And also to understand that things are not permanent. This will only stay in pictures, in photographs. So here you see how we burnt it. It was a beautiful event. It's a ritual. It's the ritual of fire and of the ritual of burning the past. And here we have this bridge in the Tortosa city. It's a bridge that we built about 10 years ago. I had never built a bridge before, and we learned a lot. And this bridge is a metaphor because it's a piece that allows us to go from one place to another. So we were creating first the project from the inside and afterwards from the outside. So it started from the inside, and then we had to see what it would be like on the outside. And it's always good to look inside. And here we have an ephemeral piece as well, with 600 dishes, with a platform, and people would just move around. Those plates, those dishes would move, and some of the plates will fall on the ground and break. And you have this fragility and the guilt of breaking the plate. And why do we feel guilty? Because we've broken a plate, because we've done something wrong. This is something that you can also explain through art and experience. And this is Aura. We created this for Uernia. My daughter's name is also Aura, but I was thinking about the aura of the trees, and these are pieces around trees, and there's this beautiful photograph that we just found by coincidence. I remember that I was with my grandmother, and my grandmother died not much time after we took this photograph. We were there together, and this is a quiet forest with music. It's a perfect place for meditation. So architecture can also evoke feelings, evoke emotions. And here we see our workshop. We created a garage into a workshop and into a home, and it's a space for therapy, for dance, and for many, many other things. There are many of us in the studio and the family, well, and people who are not family, but who are also working here. Is just another way of working and understanding life and things.
And here's a hint of a project we are closing, like this little chapel, you can say, with an elliptic auric plant. Look at this beautiful ceiling, which looks like an eye, like an underground eye, which allows it to feel emotions. There's a place to work on emotions. It looks more like a chapel than any other building shape. The cover is quite beautiful. Here, art and soul. Art and soul. This is yet another iteration. This project brings me to think about ephemeris architecture and about what happens with long-lasting works that die and rebirth. Species die and born, die and leave. If you push the limits, the jar breaks. Maybe we do not speak enough about life and death and the reflection around what are we doing in this world and how long do we have ahead. There's a beautiful work in the Gioia Cemetery. I invite you to visit it. It's a beautiful spot, Gioia. And with Mark here in the room, there were some mannequins. Thank you, Mark, for lending us the mannequins, 80 mannequins. And basically, we covered them. We buried them. We could call them. We could speak about Italy Calvino, the top and the bottom, the symbolic plan, and well, we planted these human shapes. We planted them in the landscape as they got buried and buried, and they were virtually heading towards the cemetery, like Gournay, right? When we look at the human shape, we deeply identify with the landscape because we give it a scale. So when we give it a scale, well, we think about what we are doing. If our head is on the ground, it means we are in the back. We took a picture. We wanted to be somewhere, and I thought, I don't want to get too close. You know, this willingness to last forever. How silly is that? This is in Rouen, in the north of Paris, 1 hour up north Paris. This is a beautiful project, an artistic project. Look at this pine tree. The pine tree is like the father that allows others to blossom. Why not a caracol scale, snail stairs? What about if we represent the unconsciousness? This is how we build this ladder, 26 meters high ladder, with this human, and we feel somehow afraid of the place, right? This scale is quite fun, actually. It was installed upside down. Prototypes never work. But hey, why bothering, why being too upset about it? I'm just giving you a hint of the project. I'm more interested in the reflection behind its project. When it comes to atmospheres and emotion, one of the first ephemeris works, it's a pre-ephemeris work because it was burned before it was presented. This labyrinth we wanted to build was burned, and we ended up planting this tree. Everything was burned. The smell was incredible. We had diffusers, which brought a lot of plasticity to this white tree planted in the middle of nowhere in the center of Girona. So what about this atmosphere, this intangible element that cannot be touched, that reshapes us, and that allows landscapes to be and smells to diffuse? It allows us to, bring us somewhere else. It's so difficult to build atmospheres. This is a beautiful project. We did it 10 years ago with this crater, this volcano crater, the physical part, the volcano, and an ethereal element, smoke, which shaped some sort of hands. And the smoke, I'm going to stand up. So the smoke ended up becoming extremely plastic. These pictures were taken by Pep Sau. He spent a couple of days or three taking pictures. It was a beautiful gift. Last year, we paid an homage to Pep Sala, and we thought, why not building an installation of an atmosphere? The pictures are worth. This is a lava bridge, and we have this floor plan, thanks to the effect of the light, of the laser, of the sound, and this would allow you to cross this lava lake. Time, the reflection over time and reflection. This work is a Luerna festival work also, and it's an obeliscus, and the obeliscus have a Manet-like element. Obeliscus is vertical works that somehow aim at signifying a space or time. And, I would like to open a reflection here. Many cities have obeliscus. Why not having an obeliscus in Olot? And why not having only for a few days and set it on fire? So, all the effort that it takes to build an obeliscus will be limited to a very simple obeliscus. We'll build it, and then we'll set it on fire with plenty of flames, because it's the way to mark a turning point. Do we really have to mark things permanently in a long-lasting way, or can we mark things over, a spot in time? Why not planting a little seed that lasts for a season? Look at how beautiful it is when you burn something and you're never going to see it again. So there's a star, a dialogue, also the city council. Look at the city council. This was a very high piece, and it ends up becoming a light spot, a dialogue between one part and another. There's a way also to symbolize things. And look at this clip, look at how things look inside. Magical geometry with the rocket inside. And this work, this building, has the virtue of leveraging on what's already existing in a city. This is the Logroño City Council Square. This is a beautiful building from the 80s. Moneo knows a great deal, so they would throw this straight lights to the bin. And I think they are beautiful. So we wanted to install them to promote urban condensation, to pile up matter, to set up a milestone in the center of the square. These lights, this labyrinth of light with benches. Some are 12 meters high, others less. And this, ends up becoming a very artistic work in dialogue with Monet's work in an open space. And shoes, there are shoes, if you can see them. Here you can see the shoes, the benches. Gina, Gerard. The swings. And as you can see here, time and reflection. Time and reflection. This is not the proxemic, but rather the inhabiting. Edward Hall speaks about proxemics and space. What happens to human livings with the space around us? The book is from 1971 by an anthropologist, and it speaks about to what extent space influences us in the activities we carry out. Well, urbanism, we cannot make jokes of the public space. It wouldn't make any sense. We can turn the volume up. We can go nuts. What would happen if we just launch this with this little crack in the middle with no signs, no indications? What happens? Well, all of a sudden, you promote playfulness in the public space. You end up crossing unknown people. When the space is tiny, interesting things happen. When you cross someone, human interaction, the space conditions us greatly in a very interesting way, and we can experience this with art, with architecture. It's very nice to do anthropological work with the public space. It is very interesting to, test things in a permanent or less permanent way. Then inhabiting, how do we inhabit places? This morning we've been in this house, Candosels, a tiny house. So how can we preserve these ruins to better understand the time, these stairs with a light on top? This is an Encisa work. Look at the horizon, how beautiful it is. You can look at the horizon, and here is this beautiful space. It's all about understanding the tradition of architecture, and even more importantly, the spaces that intermingle one with another. I took this picture today, this morning. They start inhabiting the house. How do we inhabit volumes, and our soul also inhabits the house? The soul gets to every little corner in every house, spaces that end up becoming dialogues. This is a restaurant called Equilibri, Balance in Olot. There's something beautiful. This little part here once was a warehouse. These are, more modern houses, maybe with less value, a nice section with a patio in the middle. And what happens in the middle? Here's a picture of the restaurant with all the furniture, the stairs. But what happens in the center? Well, we had a wall and we placed a mirror, the dialogue, and placing a mirror offers us a journey through time. The warehouse, how it looked in the past. It's talking about something that is not there anymore, things that don't exist. An architecture somehow plays with us in this sense, or allows us to play. And let me move on. 3 projects, this one in Olot, the Monsacopa house. This house is an inhabited place, an experiment. Very beautiful clients. By the way, I would like to thank clients because, they allow us to work. So this natural landscape, which was made even more natural in a ground floor, in a 9 grid with an order, and this order can be dismantled, this complexity, this contradiction can be dismantled, the freedom of getting rid of it, right? We have these parts, we have these circles. Louis Kahn, the circle becomes a square. And then I thought, oh, the gentleman is amazing. With a round, with a circle, he explains the square. And what happens when we have a center in the middle? There's a stairs. We try to stretch nature, bring it to the first line, bring the 2 trees, and the 2 cars are left behind. We don't want the cars inside the house. With plants, with rooms, this is an inhabited structure made of wood. This is not very interesting, but basically we installed a beam to support the facade. This is a way to add complexity to the work, right? This one here. This is Tati's work from 1977, and there's a beautiful scene where the nephew arrives. He lives in a modern house, in a rational house. I'm not criticizing rationalism, but sometimes it is interesting to rethink it. There are other ways of understanding the world than rationalism. And he prefers to be with his uncle, a bohemian. And when he gets back home, he's been reshaped and he moves around the house. So the relationship with the space, with heights, with sections, which allow us to have not only a physical space, but a space where we can move around and that we can reinterpret the wood structure in a CLT. And then there's this interesting image. When we look behind, there is this open picture, this mountain, and on the other hand, you are like in a penthouse. You are underground and flying, and you go like, what is going on here? We are in 2 places at the same time. And when we understand the subtlety, which the emotion of living and experiencing things bring, well, bring some interest into the place. Look at the beam, this double height that builds a patio. We don't know if it's inside or outside. It ends up becoming this shade, the shade structure. I believe this to be quite interesting. Or this little work, very vertical with a chimney. The space doesn't need to be big. It doesn't need to be big. It can be vertical. Sometimes we're in a very tiny place, but with a high verticality, with a vertical vocation. And this is another project I would like to talk about. This is a reflection proposed by architects. We can build homes, but we cannot build homes because homes, what we call home, are only made possible when human beings inhabit the place where their belongings. So can we have a home without an apartment? Look at the drawing, the furniture draw the house, but there is no house. Whitner Robinson inhabiting inside out. And here we have this structure, this over-dimensioned structure, holding a house that doesn't hold together anymore. This is the pendant signature with the center. And again, we have this structure. You can take furniture, paint the furniture, and install them. We spend some time climbing up the building, this direct relationship between the inside and the outside world. This was the lockdown. So during the lockdown, weird things happened. So again, the mirror, Martha's mom mirror. Martha, you're around. Your mom's mirror who had inhabited this place. Xevi, my father-in-law's furniture, was also here. So what happens with old furniture? What happens with our belongings? What happens is that we all have memories about this things, these places that we've handed over. We have believed in projects, in memories, in objects, and we tend to idealize that what doesn't belong to us as something intrinsic. I was about to cry when I thought, oh, this place is dead, it's fictitious, it doesn't exist anymore. Yet, it is interesting, it snowed. Here are the pictures. The narrator, music, my uncle, these are parallel projects. These are inhabited projects. At the end of the day, we do not need much. In life, we just need to bring our physical body up in order to be able to inhabit it, right? To inhabit a place. And the same music which would show us the space. Like we did in Olot with my uncle, Xevi Bayona, who crossed the place, inhabited the place. This is yet another experiment. I skipped quite quickly the pictures of homes where we can perhaps experiment less because we inhabit the places. But again, this can become prototypes to open interesting anthropological questions, artistic questions, even, transcendent questions. And this is the last project which is going to be implemented. She is my this lady who was born in 1927 in Sants, in the neighborhood called Sants in Barcelona, not far from the Mies van der Rohe Pavilion in Barcelona, which was projected in 1927-28. So yeah, they lived in parallel. So this lady, well, her dad came to Olot. She lived in Olot. She was a sewer, and she lived all her life in Olot. And 4 or 5 years ago, I told myself, maybe it would be interesting to bring all the furniture here, right? So again, I think an interesting reflection can be opened in the area of plasticity. I told myself, what would happen if we brought all the furnitures were brought here? Then she died, unfortunately, and now the furniture is here in the knife warehouse. We have made a repertoire of all the furniture. We've weighted the furniture. We've seen what's out there. With what purpose? Well, to bring them back to the Mies van der Rohe pavilion. And, there's a very interesting element. The Mies has a height of 320, 310, and our gaze is at 160, so it's half, right? Half our gaze. So the vertical symmetry is perfect. When there is a photographer and an experienced photographer, he or she bends, but the experienced ones know how to take the picture. Heisenberg, the Quaternity, the Invisible Cities, Italo Calvino. So what would happen if we put furniture into the pavilion, but from another angle? What would happen if we put the furniture in the ceiling? What about if we turn the picture upside down? What about talking about the white floor in the pavilion. What about the water structure? And there's another element. What would happen if all this furniture? What would happen if we use this resin? What about if we talk about the pavilion from a different perspective, to turn it upside down, to use a picture, because the pavilion is not going to last very long. July the 30th to August the 20th, so I encourage you to visit it if you want to see it. But oftentimes what lasts, it's not the physical space, but the photography that remains of the place, and which allows us to turn the image upside down to see the pavilion from another perspective.
Posant. És una peça artística, és una peça arquitectònica, què sé. No? Al final són preguntes, són coses que ens fan il·lusió de fer, de poder preguntar, de poder experimentar.
So this makes us happy, this allows us to experience, and all projects are like this. I really like this quote. Working on uncertainties, working the ephemeris, working inside out, working with the deepest fears, tireless and perseverant, a smooth work in direct complexity with the nature we inhabit. And at the end of the day, this is what architecture is about, right? On the grounds of these questions, this indagation, this questioning, to find, not necessarily questions, or rather answers, but rather questions. Well, this is me. Thank you very much, and thanks for your kind attention.
Moltes gràcies, Xevi. Ara és el moment que si voleu
Now is the time when you can ask questions, if you have any. So please do not hesitate. Now it's your time. Your turn. No? No questions. Okay. Who would like to break the ice?
Yes? A ver, aquí tú.
Bueno, jo em dic Aleix, soc de l'UDG.
So my name is Alej, and I'm from UDG. My question might be a little bit silly, but how are you going to manage to, install the furniture in the ceiling without breaking the rocks? Is Aniol around? Oh, Aniol is not here. Well, we've left a plan, a floor plan of all the holes we can drill. So in fact, this is not real. It was produced in 1986. It's rebuilt in 1986 with a concrete layer, 20 centimeters layer. And we said, listen, what would happen if we drill and we insert expansive drills, so we can drill and then cover it, so we can intervene in heritage? It's difficult. I don't know how we managed to bring them on board. A few years ago, with my son, I thought, okay, maybe with super glue we can try it, but it didn't work. It didn't work. Some things are very heavy, others are, supported from the floor and all the way up. So basically we drill the ceiling and then we cover it. And then we minimize the holes. Okay, thank you. And then there's another element, which is textiles. There is linen, there are, ropes, and there we have inserted some resins, and, it gives a nice effect. We are trying to reach an agreement with gravity. Okay. There's another question here. You, please go ahead. Thank you very much for the presentation. It is very interesting. It's been very interesting. I'm asking myself, a little bit more about the ephemeris. Everything is ephemeris, isn't it? It's all a matter of a scale, of time scale. It is true that sometimes some works are designed to be long-lasting, or maybe others are designed to be ephemeris, to last, for a few months, the time of a festival or of a presentation. I think it is a pity that there isn't an in-between scale, especially in areas where ephemeris installations bring an added value in, a neighborhood, in a city that needs to be activated, or when, the activation of the neighborhood is only possible through an architectural work. Wouldn't it be interesting here in Olot, because in Olot there are some decaying neighborhoods, wouldn't it be interesting to install, ephemeris work which would last 5 years, 10 years? Because perhaps it's a little bit binary, right? Some things are designed to last forever, and others only for a few months. What do you think about this in between? Well, what an interesting reflection, because things last what they can last, right? Materials are not ephemeris. What is ephemeris is the use we make of them, and some things last for a weekend, max, and others could last forever, eternally. For example, Habitare, well, lasted for 8 months, but one day we realized it didn't make any sense. So here's a graffiti. It's been here for 5 years. Well, we try to find this in between, but of course our ego brings us to try and control time. How long is it going to last? 3 years. We have no idea. It's a prototype. We don't know. Also, from a cultural perspective, we don't like when things degrade. Or maybe we do. What happens with time? Does it play in favor or against us? I love old things. I always wear my dad's jumpers because they are 40 years old. But it's not normal because it's old. In our society, what's new is more interesting. Life is changing, it mutates. It's difficult to control, especially the public space. It doesn't belong to us. It doesn't belong to the city council. Things happen that we cannot control. They escape our control, and we have tried to allow some materials to last a little bit longer. We've done our best. The stairs, the Guan stairs was set up 1 year ago, and it will be dismantled in a year. Is it going to last? I hope so, but we are not sure about it. We don't know. I guess it will, but there are some parts in this festival which perhaps will be very, very degraded in a couple of years. Some will improve, others will shrink. Letting go, control, uncertainty. What's wrong with us when we cannot control things or typify things? So, yeah. So, thank you.
El paso del tiempo, lo delicado en arquitectura pasa también a veces es que se distinga lo que es la patina bonita.
So maybe we need to make a distinction between, old things and sometimes there's an in-between, because for some people, this is beautiful, whereas for others, this is ugly, and something which is abandoned or old, too old, when in fact it can be beautiful, it can be considered beautiful. It's a very subjective element. I miss some elements here in Girona because I believe Girona brings another value to Olot. It makes it like a surreal city where things happen. It's beautiful. Beautiful. Well, the debate around time captivates us, and you have somehow inoculated a passion to think about time, what's ephemeris, What does it mean to last long or not long? You've talked about eternity, as if eternity is what is repeated but doesn't last long. Could you perhaps elaborate on eternity from the perspective you took before? Well, there are some interesting examples. Pere Jaume has amazing texts about living and dying, living and dying. In Japan, they have the Itze temple, a temple where every 25 years they take all the parts, they do a ritual. I don't know if they burn the temple, the other temple, but the old one disappears and the new one lasts for 25 more years, and then they go back to the empty plot. And it's been, a recurrent process for 500 years. We need to, do we really need to change for things to last? Or do we just have to accept time? It happens to us, the human beings. What happens to us when we're 25 years old? Isn't a 95 years old person very attractive? What's wrong? Is it that, this person is going to last less? Or like, which do you like best in the weekend, in the week? Friday, because I don't work. Yeah, but on Friday you do work. So why do you like Fridays? Maybe you should prefer Saturday or Sunday. Why don't you like working? This is yet another debate. It's our projection. We're waiting for the next holidays, right? There's a very interesting thing about time and architecture. And, we end up being quite ridiculous when it comes to time management, like if everything had to be channeled through time. And the other question is, what are we going to do with time? And how are we going to revalue time? We don't have much time. In 100 years' time, we'll not be here anymore, right? So at the end of the day, life doesn't last very long. Let's make the most of it. And what does it mean for me to make the most of it? What do I invest my time in? So these are very philosophical and interesting topics, I know, especially when it comes to this architecture, which is not ephemeris. I think my work ages well. Ruins. Can we imagine a new ruins? Something is lost in the process. Like, a ruin with plans on it and a little thing here and there. And in 1 year, nothing is left. So there's something beautiful in imperfection. The education we had in Barcelona, the School of Barcelona, the rational movement, everything needs to be explained from a rational perspective, rationalism. It's nice. Why not? Rationalism is nice. But what happens when we escape rationality? Some things cannot be understood rationally, but only through our soul. This makes things interesting. We see a picture of the Bezos towers in the Chernobyl beach, and we say, how beautiful. No, it is not beautiful. It's degraded. It's full of graffiti. It's smashed down, but the picture is beautiful. It has an interesting soul, and the soul pops up when we see time flying. And I think this also grounds us and makes us more aware of our own mortality. We are called mortals because one day we're going to die. We are mortals because we are going to die. And this makes us appreciate life even more. This is what happens when time degrades things, I would say.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Your work is very interesting, but at the same time, it's unusual. I'm curious to understand how does a common person perceive your intervention? Any story you would like to share, people experiencing your temporal interventions?
Sí, es demasiada pregunta, sí.
Could someone translate the question because I don't have the headset?
I'm curious to understand how does a common people experience your intervention? Like they are the end, like not a user, but they are experiencing it. And any story you would like to share of their experience?
Tu fai en català, tens traducció? Sí.
Do you have a translation device? I'm gonna reply in Catalan if you agree. Let me make sure I understood the question correctly. So there are two potential answers. In all the interventions, there's an element which has to do with the lived experience, to live the process, In our office, we, intervene in a very emotional way. And at the end of the day, all projects end up becoming an emotional experience. We spend a week or a month building whatever it is we build. Also, oftentimes, we want to raise questions to the audience, to bypassers. We want to awaken an emotion in them. We want to make sure that these emotions, if I feel emotional about what I'm doing, I want to convey my emotion also. Because, beauty is something that makes us feel emotional. Beautiful people makes us feel touched. So it's all about understanding how things can. I hope I have answered the question, not 100% sure. Thank you.
Bueno, ¿sí? Aquí hay ¿quién más? ¿Alguien más por aquí?
Do we have any further questions? Are there any more questions? Here, in the back, we seem to have some questions.
No.
Ara que parlaves d'això dels canvis de l'efímer i tal,
Well, you were talking about what's ephemeral, and I think it's important to focus on the transformation of the landscape and how this has an impact on the identity of places. And I'm interested in knowing how you take into account this perspective and how you include it in your work. There is one thing about the landscape that I think is interesting, because a landscape is a place that has some artistic and relevant elements, and we have the opportunity of creating landscapes. Any place can become an interesting place, an artistic place. We can turn a place into a landscape, and this is something that artists and architects can do. We can create landscapes, we can create beautiful places, we can create beautiful villages and ugly villages on the coast. We have, as humans, the capacity of creating landscapes, and most landscapes include some nature, but we also have other types of landscape. The landscape of the unconscious. Sometimes I walk along places and I remember all buildings, all places. I have landscapes in my memory. For example, in the case of Girona, we go to a place and, for example, we create this intervention and people keep on going to see those interventions. And in this way, we create a collective memory through these landscapes that are in our mind. Is like the invisible cities of Italo Calvino. He refers to this memory. So the characters change, but DNA of the place is still there. So when we do it from an ephemeral standpoint, for example, Andrew Galworthy acts with different rules to create different landscapes, and it's beautiful. But is it really a landscape? It's more of an intervention in the landscape. It reorganizes the landscape. So we are very lucky here to have a very beautiful landscape, and it has been preserved for many years. And to act, though, on the landscape is difficult. How can we do that so as not to spoil it? What do we stop doing for that to have more value? Sometimes it's difficult not to do something. I am happy about these projects because we are doing things that are ephemeral and therefore have a different plane and dimension. And sometimes you see horrible urban landscapes that make me really, really angry, and they're going to be there for many years. Unfortunately, there are many terrible landscapes that are not ephemeral. I wish we could use an eraser to erase many ugly urban landscapes, because in the 50s you had beautiful landscapes that have been turned really ugly. Our grandparents would see beautiful landscapes that we have transformed into terrible urban landscapes just by filling up the landscape. And very often the idea is to do little, but as I was saying before, in our Western culture, we tend to fill up spaces. Thank you.
Bueno, ja estava pensant Tempus Fugit.
I was thinking about Tempus Fugit, Tempus Fugit. So I think this time together has been very interesting for all of us. It's been wonderful to share this time with you. We've really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you very much.
Mm.